Hey there, SMITE fans! SWC is right around the corner, and of course with that comes qualifier season. SCC teams as well as the remaining SPL teams are all going to be fighting in order to get themselves into that main bracket in Arlington, Texas on January 12th. But before that, they have some grueling competition to go through. Across 2 weeks in December, the 7th through the 9th and the 14th through the 17th, we'll be heading down into the SCC for online qualifiers, first in Europe, then in North America. Our challenger teams will be joined by 2 open circuit teams in order to fight for their right to go to the SWC group stages on January 4th. Across 4 days, these 8 teams per region will compete in 2 double elimination groups in best-of-3 matches. After a grueling weekend of tough competition, the top 2 teams from each region will move forward to the group stages on January 4th, joining the Hounds, the Gladiators, and our other SPL teams from the playoffs for the rights to go to the SMITE World Championship. So let's go ahead and talk about group stages. The SCC Championship teams are going to be joining our 4 SPL teams in order to qualify for the SMITE World Championship in January, just a week later. After these teams finish their fight through the bracket, they will be selected by our 4 SPL teams from the playoffs in November to determine where they stand on that bracket. After that, everything will be about the SMITE World Championship live in Arlington, Texas on January 12th until we crown our champion on the 14th. There's a lot of excellent competitive SMITE on the horizon, and I hope to see you there for every single minute of it. So make sure you're following us on Twitch, on YouTube, and of course all our socials in order to know when to watch and where to watch. But until then, my name is Gormizer, and we'll see you through the qualifiers. Well, hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome into the SCC European Championship. Of course, as just mentioned, we're still on this road to Worlds, and we're still finding teams. It's Gore, it's Trelly, and I'm really excited for it, right? Because, you know, playoffs, we got 4 teams immediately going towards the World Championship, so we've got 4 that are already there. This is the start of everyone else. What other 4 teams are going to go there? Well, first, we have to get our champions from Europe. Next week, we'll be getting our champions from North America. A few weeks after that, we'll be getting just the rest, right? Whether it's SPL teams, SCC teams, SOC teams, and that's who's going to be playing throughout all of this. And as was mentioned in that video, it's double elimination in in 2 groups, right? So you've got 8 teams across 2 groups. We'll be looking at Group B or Bracket B here in just a second. So this is going to be, for those of you wondering, Match 2, Match 4, the 2nd and 4th sets today. Scarabs, Penguins from the SOC, the Scarabs, the Wargs, and the Titans, who are going to be coming from the SCC. Again, the top 2 of these spots are where you want to be. We're going to be dropping the bottom 2 from this group. Top 2 go to a 3rd tertiary group that will then fight for their right to earn their spot at Worlds. And they will be fighting, Trelly, some teams from the group that we are going to be starting in today. That's going to be in the Group A that we're going to be looking at, which I'll spoil up front. Hex Mambo, who is behind you, and then Yodie Gang, who is behind me, is going to be set number 1. A little bit later, we're going to be watching the Tanuki take on the Olympus Bolts. Very, very similar. Again, best of 3, double elim. Top 2 from this group go to a 3rd, Group C, and then those teams, plus the teams from Group B, will compete, those 4, in another double elim group until we get the top 2. Those 2 teams will then go to the qualifiers at the beginning. So you've got a lot of opportunities here, but you got to make it out of your group first, and the best way to do that is some wins on the board. And so, Trelly, looking at these teams and looking at the bracket ahead of them, they've definitely got a tough weekend.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be a tough ask for anyone. You're going to the SMITE World Championship, right? That's the goal. That's the mindset everyone walking into this tournament has to have. And, you know, to be able to perform at that level, you got to think, hey, it's not going to be an easy weekend. We're going to be, you know, going through the gauntlet, essentially. There's going to be a lot of matchups. But at the end of the day, it's just practice, right? If that's your goal, if your end goal is to be at Worlds with everyone else, all these fans watching you, then yeah, you're going to have to bring that A game.
And I'm really interested to see, because last year we got a couple of the European teams on the world stage, And so maybe as a region, you've got something to live up to from last year. Maybe the entire SCC trying to live up to that. But again, it all starts with this very first set. Hex Mambo, Yodie Gang, and of course, depending on how you've been watching, or if you've been watching, there's going to be some names that are familiar here throughout the years, as well as if you've just been paying attention to the SCC. Dzoni having a team, Rapio specifically being in mid, which kind of catches me off guard because I don't think I've ever seen him not in the jungle, but having Julio, Cozyx, Spudio, a lot of names I think that are familiar on Hex Mambo. PrettyPriMe, which if you've been around for a long time, is a team or a player whose name you should recognize and know coming from the SOC. And very specifically, Charlie, I mentioned this to you earlier when I was looking at him, but Seagyll, the solo laner on this team, who has queued up with me on SMITE game streams occasionally. Like, he's on my friends list in SMITE. And I'm going to be honest, until just now, did not realize fully he was going to be playing. So I'm excited to see what this team has to offer. Especially going up against a team like Hex Mambo, who is not going to give you an easy time, to say the least.
No, this is a tough climb for sure for Yodie Gang. Of course, there's still some recognizable names, as you mentioned, on that roster. So, you know, you've got the name talent behind you, but it's hard not to be a little bit nervous looking at some of the players on Hex Mambo as well, because they have been dominant in the EU SCC for quite some time. Doesn't seem like that's slowing down anytime soon.
And it's going to be fun to watch how these teams approach it. And the only way to do it's on the battlegrounds. You got to pick them up. That's where we're at in picks and bans. Yodie Gang will be first pick here for game number 1 as they take on Hex Mambo. And the thing that's really interesting to me is we've had some time to marinate, right? You know, time to cook for them to figure some things out. But a lot of what we saw at playoffs hadn't shifted too much from what we saw in like phase 2 for SPL.
Right.
And so it's, as we see in picks and bans already, with at least the Raijin and the Wash, and I'll throw Mammon in there, most things are sticking pretty similar. I think the Poseidon has earned his respect as he's kind of climbed up.
Definitely so. The Chernobog is the pick that is jumping out to me that wasn't looked at, and it looks like Yodie Gang recognizes that as well. They're going to grab it immediately. That's what I would have done as well. Like these mage solo laners, still very powerful, as you said. That's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, but that global presence, still extremely difficult to try and deal with, and now you've got your late game split push already locked in place.
Honestly, it's been one of the maybe just biggest powerhouses because of that rotation. Like, it's the same reason that Athena getting banned, it's because we just saw Athena's presence everywhere. It caused too much trouble, and so it makes sense to try and scoop it up as fast as you can. Hachiman, which I will say, so for a long time in Europe, it was like Heimdall, right? Yep. And I got used to seeing Heimdall as the lock-in. Hachi just feels like that guy who's going to be safe, going to be able to survive, especially against Cherno. He's going to do fine in lane. But the Thoth catches me a little off guard, but only because he kind of crept his way in.
Yep.
A few guys have made him look really good. And specifically, if this was like the Scarabs, like Zeros loves playing that guy. So I expect it from there. But to have Rapio go for it definitely shows maybe a taste of current meta.
Yeah, the Thoth is on the rise, and I think he's going to be here to stay. The Thoth and the Cuckoo, for me, are the two picks that really rose their way up into the meta and were not there at all like a month ago. But at this point, yeah, I really do like the Thoth. Outranges just about everyone. Scylla is going to have trouble closing gap, getting close. You want to try and crush him? Well, guess what? He's going to hieroglyphic assault you from across the lane. You can't step forward. So I like the grab. He's a little bit unsafe. What do you do to combat that? Grab an Awilix. Get some early pressure in there. She's probably going to just blink in and make sure that he's able to free cast.
Well, now I'm excited to see where this goes before those get locked in. Like you said, Awilix, Nemesis got locked in, so that's the jungle matchup. Ganesha is one that I'm always excited to see. But this is what has caught me off guard. Trelly, I see Chel and I see Cthulhu, both of which I think most recently I've seen find success in solos. So somebody's got to get booted out of there.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I think I would rather see the Chel as a support. Because she's got easier to hit CC. Her ult can be very supporty as opposed to Cthulhu, who just wants to dive and do a bit of damage. But at this point, you know, we've seen a lot of different style of solo laners, so either one could work, especially when you look on the opposite side and realize you're going up against a mage. It's either the Thoth or the Agni in this case. I prefer the Agni just because ease of clear. Both of them are going to have an easy time into Agni. It's not going to be the end of the world as long as you're not getting, you know, constantly ganked.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they both have decent time clearing. It's just I haven't seen Cthulhu in such a long time, and mages are so prevalent in the solo lane.
Yeah, it feels really, because yesterday, you know, we had the patch notes, the update notes for Baki Kujira, right?
Yep.
And having the conversation of like, hey, another Guardian solo laner, like it was designed for that, the way Cthulhu was designed for that. And yet I still was certain, and we had a conversation about whether or not Cthulhu support was something people would try. And sometimes it's something they might try even to their detriment.
Yep.
We'll just have to find out where things are going to shake out. But to do that, Shelly, we're going to jump down to the casters for Game 1.
Thank you very much over on the desk. It is a pleasure to be here. Supersonic Blur joined over on this side, I believe, by Kaiser here to break down this game. We've been doing a lot of the SCC stuff. So coming in with the Hex Mambo feels good. Yodie Gang, not one that we've necessarily seen, but both of these two teams, I mean, the comps they've got, I look at this, my first thought is it's Dzoni on Awilix, and he's been running games with this Kaizo.
He has. I mean, I'm pretty sure the last time that we saw Dzoni on Awilix, I said very specifically, I never want to see Dzoni play anything else. And that's not anything against Dzoni. In fact, it's a compliment because he just plays this character so incredibly well. I mean, we're talking highlight reel stuff, and Blur, I'm going to be honest with you, we're talking about other stuff as well besides Dzoni, because looking at these teams, the way that they rounded out, it's just like it's a feast for the eyes to look at, because the Yodie Gang draft is not one that you've probably seen, at least in these positions, pretty much ever, and definitely not anytime in this season. I mean, Cthulhu, they talked about it a little bit on the desk. We've been seeing very little, if at all, of this character anywhere whatsoever, and yet putting it in support specifically is such an obscure position. It gives you just ridiculous amounts of pressure, like truly an absurd amount of pressure against something like the Ganesha, clears very effectively, hard to combat into early on. But it's going to struggle to peel a little bit later. It's going to be interesting to see how they make use of this early pressure, and Dzoni's going to try to dissuade some of that over here.
They are, but BOBA is also around as well, so instead they will just go ahead and grab away the shield buff, though BOBA getting a little aggressive onto Dzoni. The Nemesis, not one for early boxing, but really doing a lot of damage in. Dzoni Feathersteps. Both of these duo lanes are going to make their way over, but Dzoni gets very low, slowed down. Dashes away, though, and a good bit of work. Spudio now trying to keep the peel on for the team. LaRevolution leading the charge. They just can't get through. They're walling off. Great work there from Cozy and as well Spudio, just to make sure that Dzoni doesn't fall for first blood. But that shows me Yodie Gang really want to get aggressive early, and even on the Nemesis, they can do it.
Yeah, that's the important thing to point out, right? Is that this Nemesis, usually a character we don't consider aggressive, or at least, you know, willing to fight until a little bit later on in the game. We're talking mid-game, like 15, 17 minutes, somewhere in that neighborhood, where you really start to feel like you get all your items online. That's probably your optimal time to box. But, I mean, BOBA looks very comfortable on this character, and I guess it makes sense, because you're probably not picking Nemesis in the current meta unless you are pretty comfortable on it. Not a character that we're typically accustomed to seeing right now, but definitely proving its worth pretty early on here, boxing very confidently against Dzoni and kind of preventing any dissuasion of the pressure in left lane. Because that's really what Yodie Gang is after, right? Like, you pick the Chernobog, you pick the Cthulhu, you know that you're going to be running it down this left lane. You know your team fight is going to be absolutely incredible. It's just a matter of whether or not you can get to that point. I think that if Yodie Gang get to about, 15 minutes when this Nemesis starts to come online, when you get a couple of items under your belt for these supports and they're not as vulnerable to getting picked early on, then their composition really starts to shine. I mean, PrettyPriMe has picked up the signature Scylla, which, we've been seeing this guy pilot this pick for somewhere in the neighborhood of an entire decade here, Blur, and he's looked good on it pretty much the entire time. You pair that with the team fight presence that Cthulhu's going to bring you, infinite amounts of frontline. SunTzuDisciple on this Chernobog is going to be split pushing so hard to deal with. Going to have to put a stop to it early.
Well, maybe they'll try again, as we've seen this play come around before, but this time it's a knockout. Pulls beads from LaRevolution, and now it's ultimates that go flying here. Whether or not anyone else comes through, it's Dzoni who takes down BOBA first because of the rotation coming through from Rapio. It's a double kill now as both of these members have fallen for Yodie Gang, and the ult runs out for Descent into Madness, meaning Rapio even gets a kill for their troubles.
Blink and you'll miss it, man. That was pretty clean and pretty quick from the Hex Mambo there, rotating over and stopping out that shield buff pressure, which is probably what the Yodie Gang were trying to play around. I mean, LaRevolution was decently far forward. You knew that BOBA was on the way down around the purple buff area when that started to shake down. And actually, we saw something pretty important that we didn't get to talk about yet. It is Bede's first relic for LaRevolution on this Cthulhu, which does make you a little bit safer, but it does make you a target as well, because you don't have a traditional support relic. You know that as soon as that gets forced away, Rapio is taking a lot of damage here. Where is his dash, Blur?
I don't know. I don't know where his dash is. You used Beads first hand. Maybe it was all just a bait, because after doing so, PrettyPriMe overextends and falls in response, because like you said, there's not much peel on this team. And if Yodie Gang find themselves in that situation where they're trying to fight, it's all about damage. And when you miss Diamond Monster and Crush, Scylla doesn't exactly do much else. I mean, she's got a root.
Yeah. To be fair, though, Blur, I don't think that's anything against Scylla. I think that a lot of characters probably struggle if you don't hit their abilities. That seems at least a little bit important to me, believe it or not.
Yeah, that should be one of those ones that you get for tips. You know, if you want to do damage, hit your abilities. I'm surprised most people... Yeah, that one, we need to put that one in the game. Next patch notes, we need to get some little cool tips. Hit this to do the damage, because otherwise it's a bit of a problem. But attempted steal from Cozy, just throwing out the Dharmic Pillars. Unsuccessful, but wastes a little bit of time. And that's an interesting one for me. Like, Cozy, like, that's a really great teamfight ultimate. Is it okay to be just throwing it out there like that?
It's a reasonably low cooldown. I mean, the only things you're really fighting around right now on the left side of the map are those shield buffs. It's still probably too early to be forcing a Gold Fury, though Hex Mambo have gotten themselves to a pretty decent early lead, so they're definitely thinking about that. And the ward coverage they've got on the map right now, probably indicative of that at least being something in the back of their minds. You can see that wall of wards going from the middle of the map over into the left lane. They have the entirety of the left side of the map, Blur, lit up like a Christmas tree, which is very seasonally appropriate and definitely makes their job a whole lot easier if they want to try to force something. So I don't hate that Cozy just throws it out, sees if you can steal away the purple buff, as long as nothing happens until that comes back online. And if you check out his little diamond on the right side of your screen, you can see that one's just about to be coming up anyway. So no harm, no foul. You might as well at least attempt to steal something away.
Well, we can see that now with 0 and 4 at 7 minutes in. It might be 0 and 5 here as BOBA finds a 1v1, but Dzoni says, hey, I'll just win that this early on. Awilix gone from very much a finesse style pick to honestly a god that just looks like it's so comfortable in this meta, really showing up big. And now, whether or not Yodie Gang can try and make any use of this,
look at Rapio.
They will, because look at Rapio. Rapio is making the rotation again, out with the Dharmic Pillars. It catches one, and they'll even silence it out. They'll force the beads. Most of the health bar as well for the Revolution, but no, they're not done. They'll throw even more ultimates in to chase it out.
All right. I didn't think they were meeting that damage check, but very clearly they did, and we've got a little bit more action in mid. Dzoni forced to jump away, but that is exactly the way you need to be playing against this Yodie Gang composition if you're a Hex Mambo fan. You need to make sure that you are taking advantage of the early game of Cthulhu. Because late game, he is going to be the giant tentacle monster that feels impossible to kill. He's got giant teamfight presence. Those knockups can be incredibly difficult to deal with once you're actually grouped up. But early on, I mean, we're talking a Cthulhu with no full defense item. He's got Thebes finished, but not completely stacked up. Still a pretty reasonable target for the knockup from Cozy into an ult from Dzoni. We got to see that in the first engagement. And even just the Ohm silence from Cozy is still enough to at least make him use the beads and dash away there. That's another 100 seconds or so that LaRevolution could end up being a target. And they're going to have to cash in on that if they want to continue to spread this lead a little bit more. They're getting a lot of good value out of just the macro of the map. I mean, it's mid-control. It's these buff invades on right that we saw Dzoni go for after killing BOBA. And it's that shield buff control in particular around the left side of the map that is really starting to pay dividends for the Hex Mambo. A couple of minutes ago, Blur, I was saying, you know, maybe a little bit too early to be flirting with the Gold Fury, at least not with a pick. But you want to talk about some good shred, Ganesha, that's incredible good damage for these objectives. They've also got pretty solid secure. I mean, it's basically a coin toss between Rapio and PrettyPriMe for who has the better secure at any given point. But Rapio's definitely got the advantage in prio because he's a little bit ahead of PrettyPriMe in farm. Not to mention a little bit better range on that secure as well.
Yeah.
So objective secure probably favoring them, but it is definitely going to be close. One to keep an eye on for sure.
And for me as well, the big thing is look at what these junglers can do. Dzoni can threaten Scylla. That's just a statement anyway, but Awilix can also do that, and they've recognized the situation, so they're going to start this up. Yodie Gang, though, hey, look at that. They even used the ult, like you said they would, for the objective pressure. And by the time anyone notices, Hex Mambo are already clean and away. 10 minutes in, they find themselves up 4,000 gold here. It's a very nice perch for any other of their continued fights here, but Julio under a little bit of trouble. The first time we see some fight over the solo side, and BOBA gets away with it thanks to the gas pedaling from Seagyll.
And you got Dzoni on rotation, so they're going to have to get out of here pretty quickly. He has the blink available, but doesn't look like he wants to use it. So one for a Gold Fury, that's generally worth it for the team that gets the Gold Fury. More often than not, solo laners will voluntarily bait their lives out to facilitate an opportunity where you can get the Gold Fury on the opposite side of the map. So Julio probably considers that to be pretty worth it. I don't know if it was necessary to get the gold, like that wasn't the reason they got it, but even though he falls, it's still pretty all right. And you are right, Blur. I mean, we've spent so much time on the left-hand side of the map, we haven't really talked about this right lane matchup whatsoever. And it's Julio on this Agni against the the E-Shell. I just can't help myself, Blur. I have to call her 9-Shell. It's just so goofy to me. It's I heard somebody as well say, if you're gonna call her 9-Shell, you might as well call him 10 Belanque, and that lives rent-free in my head.
Okay, well, that's a fun one. Well, hopefully we'll see some of that. But yeah, I'm very kind of confused on this. I mean, we saw so much respect towards these mage solo lanes. I thought mages, like the mage items specifically, I thought they got nerfed and we saw warrior buffs. What is it that these are still bringing that's so potent that these teams are valuing?
It's just a demonstration of how dominant the mages were before the nerfs came through. Because think about what got changed, right? It's things like the Pythagorum's piece, it's things like this, the Vamp Shroud, and you can see they're still building it. Like, they are not bothered whatsoever by the fact that these things got nerfed. So it's pretty indicative of the fact that before the nerf, these items were absolutely insane. Because you still get really good pressure in lane, you're still reasonably safe, as Julio will need to be here with BOBA lingering in the jungle. Good sustain, good crowd control, very good late game damage output. I mean, it just gives you just about everything that you need from a solo laner, in addition to being a little bit tankier than you should and having a lot better early clear. It's very hard to force these guys out of the solo and back onto the warriors because, I mean, when you're having this much fun just spam clearing the wave and constantly poking the opposition, you're going to have to drag them kicking and screaming back to the warrior class.
That is very true, but now, again, we'll turn our attention back over towards the duo lane. Spudio under a little bit of attention here, but it's mostly just so Dzoni's kept out of the way. Ultimate's forced. I believe that, yeah, Divine Retribution was used as well. Dzoni have a half HP, so it's a good look, but they're not done. Spudio isolated, and all the ultimates down means that Spudio is going with them.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot you can do if you're getting dove by Cthulhu ult, the jungler is there, and the Chernobog ult. That's a great opportunity here for the Yodie Gang. They're still pushing it.
They could. Dzoni forced to beads to deal with the Maya. They'll go ahead and grab themselves the tier 1 tower. Rapio has made a rapid... My goodness, that damage output is insane! And rightly so, Rapio just shows up and shuts up LaRevolution. Just a little bit too deep and a little bit too long on sticking around for that tower or the kill on Dzoni. And Dzoni hasn't backed, bear in mind. They're just constantly trying to stick around because they are hungry to answer back.
They're hunting down some of this farm on the left-hand side of the map, but unfortunately for them, Yodie Gang already secured. So in the end, it is a 1-for-1 in the grand scheme of things. The tower goes down and left, but that's honestly more a curse than a blessing in my eyes for the Yodie Gang, because that means that if Spudio wants to, he can start freezing those waves all the way at his tier 2 tower, which would make it just next to impossible for SunTzu to actually get any safe farm. He'd have to have somebody come over to hold his hand to make sure he can get that farm reliably. Doesn't look like they're doing it just yet, but something to at least keep in mind that that could get pretty difficult for them and force an earlier than average rotation from SunTzu. But hang on, we got some action around the Pyro.
We do. Johnny spotted it out, and they're calling for the rest of them. Rapio's here. Julio around the back. Might be looking towards PrettyPriMe. Yodie Gang do get themselves a Pyromancer. The fight afterwards, it doesn't look like they won. They're going to try and disengage. Cozy, though, does grab Seagyll, forces beads out. And that will be the disengage. PrettyPriMe dashes in aggressively. I'm not sure they necessarily wanted to do that. The question is, what can Hex Mambo get in response? They can pressure out this tier 1 in mid a little bit. Cozy's going to try and take it by himself. But
he wanted it.
I wanted him to get it as well, but instead it looks like they will head towards the Fury. Doesn't look like both Yodie Gang have the opportunity to go ahead and try and trade that for a Fire Giant, so it'll just be Pyro for a Primal Fury. And this to me just feels like it sets up Hex Mambo even more. Sure, they give up a Pyromancer, but what are they going to use that Runic Bomb on?
That's the critical question, right? Is how much value can you actually get out of it? And at least for the time being, probably not very much. We are in a game where both of these mid laners, again, do have decent secure, so around the objectives, it is more of a burst tool and an additional safety valve more than anything else. You're not exclusively securing it with the bomb, as we see in some matchups where, you know, if you have a Raijin in the mid lane or something else that doesn't have that great burst potential to secure the objectives, it could be cause for an early push, maybe knock down the middle T1 is usually a good direction to go in if you want to start opening up the map a little bit earlier. But Yodie Gang are going to have to do something to stall out this game. They're not going to give it up easy.
They're not. They've got all 5 members over this side of the map. It's a 4v5 fight, but huge stomach pillars just traps everyone around. Now BOBA goes into the backline to try and keep the fight going, but can't do so. It's a 4v1. Now Descent into Madness comes out. Let's see whether or not they'll follow it through. Yodie Gang need to find a target, but so far it's just onto Cozy, who's so tanky. All this damage going into the front line. They get them low. This is a fight that Yodie Gang had a man advantage in, and their health bars don't seem to reflect that.
Not at all. And all this time, Spudio's getting that farm and left, and Hex Mambo don't seem done either, dashing in, actually, trying to keep up the aggression and poke everybody out just a bit more. And that's a missed opportunity there for Yodie Gang, and I do think that it might be some woes to come for them, because that's a pretty good microcosm of how this game might be going in my eyes, Blur. Because you think about it, who is BOBA diving with? Usually if you have a warrior, well, you'd say Seagyll's the guy he's going to be diving alongside. But BOBA has to blink in basically by himself, get surrounded by 3 or 4 people, use beads because Cozy's going to silence him immediately, and then dash away before he dies. And all in that time, he's supposed to be doing relevant damage to the backline. It's a pretty tall task for BOBA on this Nemesis. And you think, you know, the Cthulhu ult can help you do some good knockups in the backline, put out a little bit of damage, but in the end, Blur, if you don't have that cooldown ready, if you have to be peeling for your own backline, it's going to be BOBA on an island trying to see what he can do on his own. And that could make his job a lot more difficult. I mean, in that fight, certainly, it didn't look like he got quite as much value as you would have wanted out of, you know, Blink Jungler Ultimate in the backline. Usually that's supposed to leave a much more lasting impression. Right there, Hex Mambo kind of just swatted him away. And like you said, they had the man advantage for Yodie Gang. It didn't seem to matter just because Hex Mambo were waiting and ready for the aggression from Yodie Gang.
And for my money, Cozy's ult as well, no one could afford to walk through it, so they all kind of stunted it. As soon as BOBA blinks in, everyone's sat in the box going, guys, we can't follow you. So it shuts that down. I'm looking at Cozy for these big team fights. You already mentioned the silence is so impactful. The ultimate just zone control, either putting people in a box or creating a space that they can't go through. Around Fire Giant, the way Hex Mambo have been playing this, it's all about that control. Like, this is an 18-minute game. There are 8 kills. We're in EU, baby. It's a positional awareness. Look, I will take it. This is precision, mechanics, and recognizing what you can give up without just having to brute force out a kill on it. It is not checkers with the sledgehammer. It is machine precision chess.
And it's going to be machine precision around this Pyromancer once again, Blur. It would look like we've got a big grouping from, call it 7 players, give or take, and Hexmon, we're going to be the first ones to grab this. Yodie Gang are on the scenery, though, and don't want to give it up just for free. But with Spudio here, it's going to be a much taller task for them.
It will. The question is Johnny going to be able to take out the fight before the ult goes through from Sun? They get the ult up. They'll put him low, but Hex Mambo get the Pyromancer. SunTzu now makes the rotation on into mid. But look at this, Hex Mambo just completely disengaged. PrettyPriMe can't step up to put out damage because Hieroglyphic Assault. I mean, Trelly mentioned it. If PrettyPriMe wants to do any damage, he's going to have to eat the entirety of Hieroglyphic Assault. His health bar can't withstand that.
Yeah, and neither can LaRevolutions either, because don't forget, he's the guy who needs to go in. If you are not pressing your Cthulhu ultimate ability and descending into madness, it's just not a good fight for Yodie Gang. That cooldown is so important to what their team fight looks like, being able to give that give that control, give them an option to knock up the backline. Hang on, Yodie Gang, Fire Giant from behind at 20 minutes was flirted with, but it only takes Cozy to force them away. And I think that was more, F-Dot used to call it throwing the brick through the window, and the response time was very good, Blur.
It was, but not only that as well, I don't even think it was a brick. Like, a brick implies they did damage to the window. That Fire Giant took no damage whatsoever. That was more like tapping on the glass. Like, can we even look at it? No, they can't look at it. Which also means as well, they're secure to steal. Might be a problem. Seagyll forced down to the ultimates very low, and Dzoni just walks them down. One knock up, and down they fall. Now with the man advantage, despite having the Chernobog in the other lane, Yodie, I don't even know if they can defend this Fire Giant. I mean, what they're going to do, PrettyPrime's ulted once this game, and it was not successful. Now in the process, it looks like they're going to give this one up. They're just going to try and push up these lanes as far as they can.
You might as well, man. Like, if Seagyll's gonna die that easily, and nothing against Seagyll whatsoever. I mean, he just got caught out in a position he shouldn't have been in, but it did not take a whole lot of time for them to bring him down when you pair up Dzoni with the perfectly timed knockup. After that, after that, Ishello was finished off, and you also have Spudio already on the scene, ready to go in with the mounted archery. It's just, you can't stand there. It's very simple. It's just as easy as that. And BOBA gonna go for a 1v1. Dzoni is so patient, man.
Look, that just goes to show. That was Divine Retribution. That's Nemesis pretty much as strong as they're gonna get. And now the turnaround potential is here for them. B's forced, their health bar's low, and Dzoni uses the jump patiently once again. Not for an escape, but for damage this time. It's just, like you said, so patient on that. BOBA was threatening them with everything. And Dzoni just said, nah, I don't need to worry about this. You're not a threat. They are 21 minutes in. Nemesis starts to come online, but look at the gold deficit they find themselves in. They cannot muster up any kind of a threat here.
And they're going to have to find an answer pretty soon here, Blur. And for my money, it's got to be spreading out the map and getting some more farm. Because it's very clear that where you're at right now in the, the economy of the game, you don't have the resources required to fight back into what Hex Mambo is bringing to the table. You got to get at least a little bit more farm on, in particular, Seagyll, so that he can at least get the starter item finished off. He's still a decent bit away from being level 20. You don't even have the upgraded starter for your support. No level 15. Actually, scratch that, just ticked over for LaRevolution. But that's still a pretty critical component missing from the team fight from Yodie Gang. They have to slow down the push from Hex Mambo here. If Mambo can successfully push down these towers, threaten one of these phoenixes, and potentially just walk in and bomb it with the bomb that Cozy has here, that's going to be bad news for Yodie Gang. Even if it means potentially staking your claim here, you might have to defend.
Well, Rapio throws out the ultimate just to dissuade anyone from stepping forward. And look at that zone control from the mage mid laner there. Just threatening with damage means that the left phoenix is gone. And now Hex Mambo, they'll threaten out the mid phoenix if they can, look for a potential pick. But I love this. It's super controlled. They're not overextending. They were happy to take all the towers, but knowing they've got the presence and pressure to do so, they'll try for the mid phoenix. Not really focusing it just yet. Goes down to about half health the second Spudio starts looking at it. And that alone is showing just how much damage Hex Mambo have at the availability to do so. Spudio more than comfortable tearing down these phoenixes, but they're just poking, just constantly threatening this, because look at the health bars. Sun's low, BOBA's low, Revolution's getting low as they speak. No one can step up here, and it's all because Rapio is just peppering them with damage.
The Revolution health bar pretty low. Could be the go button for Hex Mambo. Looks like they want to walk in.
They'll walk in. Phoenix still getting lower. PrettyPriMe needs to hit a big ult. They hit it on Julio. Unfortunately, that is one of the tankier members of the team. This Phoenix still stands. Everyone's still just more than comfortable surviving around now. And up again with the Dharmic Pillars. There goes that mid-Phoenix.
Wow.
Clinical work there from Hex Mambo. No one falls from Yodie Gang in that. That wasn't brute forced. It was just pressure them out so much that they have to back.
And that's just so smart, the way that Hex Mambo played that, because you got to think about what is the optimal response from the enemy team. And we talked about a little earlier on, Blur. They have great teamfight ultimates in the Living Nightmare from Sun Tzu and the Descent into Madness from LaRevolution. Those are the two core components of their team fight. They need to get maximum value out of those cooldowns if they want to get a successful team fight. But the thing is, when you're behind and you have deep investment cooldowns like that, we're not talking throw it out from distance and hope it works kind of thing. This is LaRevolution needs to be face tanking damage and walking forward into the enemy team. Sun Tzu needs to be diving the enemy backline for this to happen. Hex Mambo basically just stood on the Phoenix, did half of its HP, and said, all right, what's the game plan? Are you going to fight us to the death over this one objective? Or are you going to let us take this for free? And Julio could be in a bad spot here, but damage has already been done.
And there's the dash back up thanks to the cooldown from the rest of the abilities. A final judgment clips Sun Tzu for 1,000 damage, and they'll try and answer this one back. Spudio does, and Dzoni finds BOBA as well. This is all on for Julio, and it's all gone wrong. Yodie Gang looked for a potential pick. Julio had no dash. We can find him. We can kill him. Guess what? The rest of the team shows up and says, that is a mistake. We will punish you for it. And now they've even got Titans available to them. Fire Giants are respawning. I'm not even sure they need it with the man advantage that they have. It's 30 seconds before anyone respawns. And PrettyPriMe and LaRevolution do not pose a threat to any of them. Hex Mambo are looking to try and take this game now.
They very well could. I mean, 2 birds down. They've only got 1 more to contend with. It's a guaranteed Phoenix if they want it, or they can look for the end of the game. We'll see what they go for.
So far, Julio stepping forward just to try and keep PrettyPriMe out of the way. They've got the Phoenix here, but smart play. Hex Mambo, don't get giddy. They recognize, hey, maybe that 30 seconds. Actually, it took us a little bit longer to get the Phoenix than we wanted. They've still got pressure. I mean, the Titan's there. Yep. There's no way Yodie Gang can go up to try and take this Fire Giant. It would have to be PrettyPriMe dashing in, beating because Dzoni will ult that, and then ulting in response to try and steal it. But look at how quickly it's going. This is supposed to be the late game jungle boss that takes a while to defeat. Didn't look like it to me.
No, it went down without a whimper. And this is, I mean, Blair, we're getting to the point that the great Ryan Agro-Bailey would say these are the 99%ers here for Hex Mambo. You've got 2 Phoenixes down, 1 just now respawned in left lane, so that's about as weak as it's going to get. 15,000 gold at 27 minutes is still pretty relevant. We're still looking at what appear to be completed builds for Yodie Gang, but actually still some recipes still waiting for them. And Hex Mambo are looking for the fight.
Well, they'll try it, but whether or not Yodie Gang let him get it for free, they're trying. I'm a Monster comes out. Rapio is low, and LaRevolution will take that down. They get 1, but look at what they're losing in response. It's an outright massacre coming through from the carries as Dzoni finds a triple and a double kill. It's a full house for Hex Mambo. And with the Phoenixes all gone, that 99% is now a 99.9999. And they'll round it out and take game 1 here.
You know, I wonder, Blur, is it 100%? If they don't even walk into this fountain, do the fire waves still end the game? I would argue you got a pretty good shot of it with all 3 waves pushing down into the Titan room. Doesn't matter, they'll walk in and do it the old-fashioned way, but it's just a great game from Hex Mambo, man. That was a fantastic demonstration of control over the map and execution of the counter positive to your opponent's game plan. The entirety of Yodie Gang's draft was based around we're using these big ultimates, we're all going in at the same time, we're diving deep together, and Mambo never gave them the chance. They were playing aggressively, they poked them out from a distance, they made sure that the engagements were more sporadic and less planned out. It was much more difficult for Yodie Gang to get a full 5-on-5 team fight than Hex Mambo really should have been giving them.
It's a really rough one, but a hell of a start for a matchup here for Hex Mambo. I mean, you look at that. Usually, this is the part where you'd ask, oh, what do you want to see different? Like, you can't ban everything that happened. It's a complete pick up and change your entire draft here that Yodie Gang are going to have to look and do. But I guess that'll have to be for the devs to try and decide and pick some bans for game 2. But before we get there, we're going to go ahead and throw it to a quick break.
trying to get you off my mind. I can see the signs, gone and got it on the side. Thought you were being sly, thought I'd never catch your line. Trying to keep it in, I can see it in your eyes. Go with the wind of you, still pretending that we're cool. Something on your cheek, then that's strange, it's true. Trying to be a man, trying to be a man tonight. I'm afraid I can't, I'm afraid I can't tonight. I can't let you go. I'm scared of none above, but you feel right. I'll give you on, cause you make me feel alive. Holding on to nothing while my karma hits the ground. You're not around, no longer around. It's a little bit too much for me. Can't shake the thought you touch and feel. Know what I wish that I would see when I close my eyes. I close my eyes, thinking like I was naive, thinking that we could be the lead, and know that I would ever see when I close my eyes. I close my eyes. I'm scared of none above, but you feel alive. I'll give you on, cause you make me feel alive. Holding on to nothing while my karma hits the ground. You're not around, no longer
That's right, what these teams are playing for, and of course what we've been waiting all year for is a trip to Arlington, Texas, the 12th through the 14th for the SMITE World Championship. Hopefully we'll see you there. If we won't see you there, then hopefully you'll be watching on Twitch or on YouTube. You'll be able to catch us live all 3 of those days. There's going to be a whole ton of content. And I mean way more than just the SBL games. There's going to be a lot of reveals and discussions and things like that. And of course, you can rep the merch, whether you're there in person or if you want to rep it at home. And as we just saw yesterday, you can match the new Awilix skin that's coming out, the SWC Awilix skin, which I believe is going to be a Twitch Prime drop during the World Championship. And you can match that with that jersey that's up there at the top. Of course, there's other merch for your favorite teams, you know, bags, hats, joggers, sweatshirts, all sorts of things. So while you can get it, you should go to shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SWC and pick up some of that merch. Support your favorite team, support us, support everything SMITE while you have the opportunity, again, whether you're there or you're at home. But it's Gort's Trelly, and it is a 1-0 lead for Hex Mambo here. And very specifically, Hex Mambo, Trelly, they look good.
Yeah, that is kind of the vibe I expected coming into this game. I do think that Yodie Gang put up a decent fight. I didn't love the draft. Let's start there, right? The Cthulhu support wasn't doing it for me, right? The Shel solo, I saw the idea, right? I saw the execution. It just didn't get enough value either, so maybe, you know, a switch up in draft could have done them well, but it was the Dzoni and Rapio show, and it was, you know, the show just ran its course. It did every season. The ratings were great, and that's what it seemed like to me.
And, you know, you got to give him credit. So, first off, Dzoni, it feels like, you know, people have had that discussion just as a player of how just excellent, really. Like, there's no other way to mince words about it, how excellent of a jungler Dzoni has been. And so that was already going to be tough. But we have definitely seen in the past, in fact, even versions of Hex Mambo where that has faltered and causing some trouble. But when you have Rapio playing the way that they did on the Thoth, and then you add in the damage numbers that are getting pumped out by like an Agni and the setup from Cozyx, all of a sudden it becomes a much more difficult story, because it's not just, hey, can we take down Dzoni? It's, hey, these guys are real good as a team, man. And it's real difficult to deal with. You can see that 12 assists for Cozyx, 2, 1, and 10 for Spudio. 2, 1, and 5, joining the fights maybe a little bit later, but again, 19,000 damage, 26,000 damage. A lot of numbers getting pumped out from Hex Mambo, and that's not even looking at the gold. So a lot of what you saw, it sounds like starts with some changes in the draft, even though like maybe some play on field needs to change, but most of that originates from struggles that the draft were just struggling to keep up with.
Right, because if you look at the composition, it seems like a full-on dive comp, right? You're going up into that Cthulhu ult, you're using the Isha ultimate and just saying, hey, I'm going to heal the rest of the squad, we're all going to dive in together and sort of just chase down. But a lot of that composition takes a while to get online. Scylla really wants to hit level 20, Chernobog wants to be able to split push, get some items online. Same with Cthulhu, you want a bit of damage in the kit. You know, the CC is great, but you need follow-up for that CC. So it seemed like slotting a little bit towards late game where Dzoni on the Awilix was just like, hey, I've got early game covered. I'm going to get my team there. So I'd like to see more early focus from the Yodie Gang.
Well, we'll see what kind of things they change. We jump into picks and bans for Game 2, and the teams are going to swap sides. Hex Mambo will be the first pick this time around. And Trelly, it feels like, first off, bans last time around were not only clear and concise, but Chernobog got through, didn't have that impact, and it feels like he's one of those gods that you can let through if you can control it, or if you don't think that that's going to give enough of a massive advantage. Whereas like the Raijin, the Poseidon, I would even throw into the conversation, Mammon, you can't really let those through and then cross your fingers they're not going to have an impact. They are going to help control the game, and at least, well, actually at this point, both of those are available.
Well, and because it's open, the Raijin is going to be first pick, though the Hex Mambo value it just a little bit more. Question is, will Yodie Gang pick up the Poseidon after an Anhur lock-in? The answer seems to be yes, and yes, they will lock that
It's
one
a heavy
as well.
probably.
Yeah, especially in the lane matchup, right? You need something that can clear at least as close to as quickly as Raijin can, so I like the instant Poseidon counter back as well. Still, though, you're going to need to put some pressure onto this Raijin. You can't just let him free cast over in lane. It becomes very difficult. The Raijin will be a problem if let to his own devices.
Well, they answer the Anhur with a Hachi. Again, Hachi, I don't think had any bad moments last game, right? But you had such an excellent team around you. And now you've got someone who maybe can play a little more aggressive in lane. The Awilix is going to be on the other foot, so that'll be an interesting jungle matchup when Hex Mambo decides to lock theirs in. But Baba Yaga, we haven't seen a whole lot of it. I feel like in a very interesting instance as well, because she felt very prevalent at the beginning of like the second phase, and then just kind of slowly petered out, I guess, as other mages kind of took over. But I don't really feel like she's that bad, and also Europe loved her to begin with.
No, she's definitely not bad. It's just I think other mages got online earlier. Maybe that's the big difference maker. You have pressure early on because of this build, whereas Baba Yaga still does want to sit back and sort of stack up. A lot of knockups on the side of Yodie Gang, trying to facilitate that Awilix. I was talking about early game pressure, and it does seem that's what they're going for. Hex Mambo answer back and say, hey, you bring Awilix to the party, we're going to bring Rat. Still can fight level 1, level 2, as early as possible. If we find someone, we are going to get active. Hex Mambo's not going to let the early game pressure go away.
And having that, along with the Vulcan, which going into this patch, again, so yesterday, if you watch the update notes, that's like Tuesday, that's a different conversation for both this week and next week. But the Vulcan, going into this one, he's got some changes that at least made him feel like he could hit a little harder, right? Make it maybe add a little punch behind him. But it does feel like it still skews a little late game. So it feels like the junglers are going to be maybe controlling the tempo for us.
Oh, yeah.
But do you see the mages, Poseidon joining, Raijin joining, and then adding in like big burst Vulcan, having the burst from a Baba Yaga really changing the play?
I think the burst is going to be very impactful, but it's all going to be off of which jungle gets ahead first, and I'd be looking towards Dzoni immediately, right? Are you getting killed, or are you getting the kills? And whatever comes first is going to be where those mages can follow up from.
Well, the only way to find out is to jump down to the caster, so without further ado, it's Blur and Kaizo to take it away.
Thank you very much, Gore and Trelly over on the desk. Game 1, Hex Mambo decimated Yodie Gang's comp so impressively, they change every single pick. Like I mentioned to you, Kaizo, this is going to have to be a change-up in comp. I thought maybe they still keep some of the picks, like some of the flavor, but just tweak the gameplay. No, they say complete clean slate here. Hex Mambo, though, they get to themselves a Ratatoskr for Dzoni, who can now be even more mobile than the Awilix. They get to pick Raijin that was banned away from them. Spudio goes back to the Hachiman. It looked incredible for them. It's a hell of a comp to try and fight into here, Kaizo.
Yeah, and it is worth noting as well that Yodie Gang voluntarily opting for the second pick, which I think is always interesting to determine which is better between the two. They do end up getting the Anhur and the Poseidon, which Anhur typically considered to be the #1 ADC right now. Poseidon kind of the counter punch to the Raijin's punch over there in the solo lane, more of a rising star than anything else, specifically to counter this Raijin more often than not. So they definitely had a game plan going in. It is interesting that no Chernobog picked up here is something that caught my eye pretty early on. Yodie Gang preferred the Anhur. Hex Mambo got the option for it even after picking that Raijin and went for the the Hachi instead. It is a bit of a different look for him.
Certainly is, and the Des mentioned this is going to be more of a jungle-focused thing. These mages can follow up whichever of these junglers gets themselves a little bit ahead here, but I just want to mention as well, this PrettyPriMe, Vulcan has been the signature pick. There is a skin being used in this game specifically because PrettyPriMe, this was their signature god. It was Scylla and Vulcan. So we've seen the Scylla, and it got manhandled. The Vulcan, though, like was mentioned, did get a couple of buffs, but is it going to be just as easy to abuse?
I don't know. I'm still unsure of how good this Vulcan really is. We've seen some good showings from it. We've also seen a couple of stinkers along the way. And they did mention, obviously, received some changes recently, in particular Blur, some additional base damage on the Inferno Cannon. Earthshaker gets a little bit more damage when you use it at minimum range, which, you know, if you're going straight down trying to peel for yourself, that's when you go. But oh my god, he's dead!
Yep, just straight up. I'm going to run at them and kill them is what Hex Mambo said. And Dzoni dashes on in aggressively. BOBA just could not manhandle the situation at all. They tried to be as aggressive back as they could, but PrettyPriMe had spent all of their kit trying to clear the wave. And as a result, BOBA falls incredibly early here. Big difference from game one.
Big difference for sure, because BOBA, don't forget, at least before the first couple of kills went down in the left-hand side of the map, BOBA was kind of calling the shots over here in the dual lane, had that early rotation, looked to force out Dzoni and actually fought him back into his tower and facilitated that first engagement around the shield buff. See a miss from him here in the right lane, but it's a very different pace that BOBA's going to have to play at.
Oh no, Johnny's just doing Johnny things. I'm concerned for the way this game is going. Rad doesn't even have blink, it's beads. Johnny is just taking it to him, straight in, darting. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the crit dart come out with how these darts have been this impactful, but dual lane as well as getting manhandled as well. LaRevolution trying to get a bit aggressive will cause Cozy to row away. These health bars can't sustain this much damage.
I just gotta say, Blur, I love to see Atlas back in the mix here. And granted, it is from LaRevolution, who played, you know, Cthulhu support in the last game, so maybe not necessarily indicative of the pulse of the meta, but certainly a character that's a whole lot of fun to watch, very good in that early to mid stage, can be very effective at bullying out an enemy's support, facilitating some early objective shred because of that ultimate ability, the Gamma Ray Burst. Not only a above average secure tool for a support, but also allows you to burst it down a little bit faster with consistent damage and that protection shred. It's just such an interesting character to watch and gives another good solid knock-up for BOBA to be pulling off of. They mentioned it on the desk that literally everybody on the Yodie Gang does have a knock-up in some form or another. Good luck pulling off of Seagyll's knock-up in particular, but technically doable, Blur.
I mean, he's got two of them as well. You've got the ult as well for the knock-up, though, like you said, there are a lot of ways to try and facilitate BOBA. The question is, we just saw, as you were doing the analysis, we saw blue buff invaded, green buff invaded. Now Hex Mambo have got themselves about 1,000 gold lead. Dzoni is back over this side of the map, and it looks like gold buff is not the call. It's ultimates to go a-flying, and who's going to be dying? It's going to be SunTzu, taken down by the wave, washed away. Now making the rotation here. BOBA is in. Did get a knock-up, but it was on the support, so don't want to go firing off the ult just yet for that. And now they find themselves 3 kills down, 2 in mid lane and 1 in the duo lane. What do Yodie Gang need to do to pump the brakes on this? Because if they're not careful, Hex Mambo is going to win this in the next 15 minutes.
they've got to play out of BOBA, and that's an unfortunate response for that question because BOBA is a pretty solid bit behind Dzoni, who is a fed Ratatoskr, which already an early game titan in himself, but when you're picking something like this Awilix, you have to be willing and able to play aggressive early on and play around getting these picks consistently off of people that don't have relics available. And the thing is, Blur, they have 5 sets of beads for the Hex Mambo. It's not a whole lot of amazing targets for them. He's going for it here, though.
He's looking good damage, gets the beads, need to chase it out just a little bit more, but the stun comes through. And now BOBA's on the retreat because Home Sweet Home comes through, a TKO on both sides. Yodie Gang, though, BOBA is looking for it. They're looking, they're trying desperately. The back goes through in the end. So great look there. And like you said, it has to be BOBA who was playing it. I think maybe the one thing why they didn't want to ult was they didn't have that Jotun's Wrath finished. Now they've got that online. They can be a little bit more liberally using of it with that 20% cooldown coming online. But Dzoni as well has that full Acorn upgraded. Now going to be working on it as well. So 5 minutes in, Yodie Gang have pumped the brakes once. Can they do it again? Double pull in. Rapio uses the blast away to get away from this, but SunTzu's in a rotation as well. Ults go flying. Who's going to be following it through? BOBA blinks in, hits Rapio. That's SunTzu taking one down. Finally, Yodie Gang answer backs. Can they get Cozy? They can because of the pull.
And he's got one already. Dzoni landing back in, gets one HP on LaRevolution. He dashes out, but gets cleaned up anyway.
All right, well, now we're going to see whether or not the Gravity Surge is good just for the attack speed. PrettyPriMe answers back for some good peel. Nice bit of self-peel. The Vulcan turret might do it, but no, just out of range. PrettyPriMe gets themselves a double kill. We got a fight on our hands here, Kaizo. Yodie do not want to lose this one.
Amazing. Fantastic. Could not have asked for a better engagement from the Yodie Gang, because not only did we get to see what makes Atlas so incredibly cool to watch him play, the way that he can just pick people up and deliver them to whatever crowd control, whatever damage follow-up is necessary. We also got to see the Gamma Ray burst. They finally successfully punished the Hex Mambo for what could have been vaguely considered an overextension. And in particular, they shut down Dzoni. They get some decent farm onto BOBA, who now has 4 of 4 kill participation. And now they're in a position where you can fight back into this lane much more comfortably. Ordinarily, if you're a couple of kills behind, things can be very dire, especially with the way Hex Mambo played the first game, right? Like, they had a stranglehold of that early game as soon as they got the first fight under their belt. But now Yodie Gang have punched back and are basically back to parity. I mean, we've got a couple of level leads in a couple of different places. 500 gold separating these teams is nothing compared to where we started at.
Oof, ultimate coming out from Seagyll, trying to be aggressive over against Julio. Puts them a little bit lower than they want, but with the sustain they've got available, I doubt Julio is worried about that too much. And just to round out on your point, for me, you mentioned BOBA. It's all going to be played around BOBA and how aggressive they can be. I'm looking at LaRevolution. They actually got to dictate something this time. They had no opportunity to do so. We'll see whether or not this 2v2 goes well here. BOBA and Julio, but it's not a 2v2, it's a 3v2. Rapio's here, and Rapio says, hey, guess what? I'm going to be a part of this. I'm getting you guys out of this engagement. Julio takes down Seagyll, and as a result, Hex Mambo find themselves another 2 kills. This time, no involvement from LaRevolution.
And Cozy gets pulled in here, should be all right. That's just a vision diff, man. It's sometimes just that simple. Very clearly, they just didn't know 3 players were going to be over there. BOBA wanted to play aggressively because, again, that's the way you're supposed to play the character he picked. You're supposed to be the early game bully. You're supposed to play around that gravity surge cooldown as closely as possible. But when you don't have sufficient vision to know how dangerous it is to actually go for those plays, sometimes you do end up getting punished for it. And that does kind of knock the wind out of the sails of the Yodie Gang. Because again, they were pretty much back to even. But now, once again, Johnny's got a sizable lead. Hex Mambo are once again pretty comfortable. Only beads missing from Julio. Johnny's got him back available. And Yodie Gang are, they're getting some frisky stuff going on.
They do have a lot of protection shred to go through for this, and no one seems to be noticing from Hex Mambo. So yeah, Gold Fury goes down free to the Yodie Gang. Back to parity once again, or close enough at this point. It seems to be that 600 gold is about the best Hex Mambo can, or the best Yodie Gang can close the gap to here. But hey, 600 gold is basically parity when spread across 5 members between all the items, so it's a good look for them. But if we go into towards the later stages, blink attempt by BOBA, but going into the later stages of this game, are either of these teams worried, like, we have to win this early because we fall off?
I wouldn't say that it's, you know, alarm bells are not ringing, but they should be for Seagyll, because he's going to get absolutely eviscerated by Dzoni combining with Julio there. I don't think alarm bells are ringing based on composition alone here. I do think that Hex Mambo pretty invariably have the better late-game team composition, but it's not like you didn't pick 5 Thanatoses for Hex Mambo, or excuse me, for Yodie Gang or anything like that. This is a composition that mid-game will feel very, very strong, falls off very slightly in the late game. I think that in particular, the Awilix can be more difficult than the average jungler to play around the late game stages. But Hex Mambo have a spectacular late game composition. I mean, every single one of these characters, in particular the BOBA Yaga, wants to take it as long as possible. And SunTzu jumped in 1v2!
Yeah, I wanted a 1v1, but there is no such thing as a 1v1 in the duo lane. Now BOBA and LaRevolution trying to answer this back beast forced on Dzoni. The pull is there, but it doesn't even matter. Now coming through, Cozy sends the sticks ahead of time, and Spudio gets themselves a pick as well. What started as a fight that Yodie Gang took ends with Hex Mambo dominantly winning it.
PrettyPriMe ulting his feet here is getting chased down by Rapio, who takes a large sum of damage. But Dzoni is here, no blink available, remember, so won't be able to use that to finish him off, should be okay. And I said earlier, Blur, that I want BOBA to be the one calling the shots and really dictating the pace for the Yodie Gang. I might have to eat my own words here, because he's starting to get a little bit too frisky in the jungle. I want BOBA to take a deep breath here. You're 2 levels down on Dzoni. You gotta get some farm under your belt. You can't afford to fall behind the level curve. When you're the same level as the enemy's support as an early game jungler, that's a pretty sure sign that something did not go according to plan. So I'd like to see BOBA take a deep breath, back up a bit, take some smarter, some more coordinated engagements, and stop trying to force things, because it feels like every single time we're seeing BOBA get aggressive, there's a lack of vision, they're outnumbered. It might work out, but it is very possible that Hex Mambo could be just around the corner with the counterpunch. They're going for it again on this Ratatoskr here, and I just don't love this call.
It's not particularly a fight that Yodie Gang really want. They just want to try for poke. But PrettyPriMe tries to show up and just can't match the damage output. Now in a 1v1 situation. Well, I say 1v1, but Rapio answers the kill. This is all just for the beacon that is around. Yodie Gang had the members there. Unfortunately, they tried for the fight, and like you said, they're just not able to match the levels. Sure, they've been able to match the gold and towards most of the items, but every time it's these levels, just look at this. SunTzu was being pressured out by 3 people, just has to sit and watch and make sure they leave. But everywhere, there seems to be like at least a level difference, and it's just not allowing Yodie Gang any opportunities. We saw one good fight where they were able to dictate something, and now LaRevolution is still level 8, 13 minutes in.
Julio, he's never getting that kill. He's just using taiko drums because it looks cool, I guess. But I gotta agree with you, Blur. I mean, Yodie Gang had that one really good engagement on the green buff area, and it feels like they've just been riding that high for the last couple of minutes, because they've really been just butting their head against the wall and waiting for something to break open. And it's kind of their skull that's breaking open, because a lot of these engagements don't look great for them. They're going for a fire giant here.
This is a call that they tried last time when they didn't have the damage output for it. This time, though, they might. Cozy's here and made the rotation. Julio's here. Can they go ahead and steal this away? Yodie Gang get themselves the Fire Giant. It's a big call for them. This will even things out and give them a fighting chance in this ensuing battle. But Dzoni just dunks in on 2 and starts causing a ruckus, leading the charge. LaRevolution will end up falling. Julio not done yet. Taunts back in SunTzu, and that's 2 gone.
I'm sorry, I swear we just saw Julio use that ability, but apparently it's back online.
Cooldowns, mate.
I'm gonna be honest, Blur, I don't hate the call whatsoever for Yodie Gang, because yes, you do lose 2, but you get Fire Giant on 3 people, and perhaps more importantly, you stop Hex Mambo from being able to get a Fire Giant. That does mean that the game slows down a little bit, and that's exactly what Yodie Gang need right now. They're about 6,000, call it 7,000 gold behind once this Oni Fury gets done. You absolutely need to just take a breath and back up, but they are not doing that. They are still chasing it all the way down. They've got BOBA on the flank here, and he blinks in.
There's a start. It's on for Rapio. Home sweet home is not enough. Dzoni, though, still answers back. This damage output from the Ratatoskr is insane. Seagyll's trying to answer back into Julio, but Julio doesn't care. Julio goes in aggressively, looking for more damage. Dzoni jumps back on in into the backline. Julio takes down Seagyll, and PrettyPriMe falls as well. Hey, those 3 members with the Fire Giant, they're gone. Dzoni comes up with a triple, and Sun Tzu is left to ponder where it all went wrong.
Man, I don't want to sound like a broken record, Blur, but I just don't love how fast the Yodie Gang are trying to play the map right now. You're so far behind, you just got Fire Giant as a stopgag more than anything else. I don't really see the point of chasing them all the way to the Primal Fury, the Oni. Even if Hex Mambo get that Oni Fury and then no fight takes place, that's still not the worst position for Yodie Gang to be in. Because they can still spread the map, they can still try to catch up, they can structure an engagement a little bit better than that, and not have to worry about the backpedal damage from Hex Mambo, not have to worry about the turnaround that Dzoni has. Julio has so much damage right now and is next to immortal with this build that he's got online. You just don't have the levels, don't have the items, you're so far behind, Blur. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it just is weird to me how fast they tried to play that. I feel like if they back up, get some farm, they could possibly be in a better position, but now you put so much effort, so many resources, and gambled so much to get that Fire Giant, and like you said, just stripped off of the only 3 people that had it. Yodie Gang are going to need another similarly scaled miracle in order to get back into this game, and Hex Mambo don't look like they're going to be willing to give it up anytime soon.
And yeah, you say you're a broken record, but that's just because of the way the game has been going. It's always been this same kind of a play. I mean, even so much as same kind of a build, LaRevolution. I never got the chance to mention it, but tier 2 breastplate, and then pivoting away towards this Talisman of Energy, it feels like it's centered around cheap, effective items, but I don't think it's really worked out in their favor, as Yodie Gang now trying to push up this left-hand side, like you said, split the map, but it's only Sun Tzu who's under pressure now. Everyone else was caught out on the retreat or on the way over. Rapio clears out 1. And now, hey, we've seen this before. Dzoni has no concern. He is 1v4, and there is no concern or threat on his life at all.
BOBA blinked in there, tried to land a knock-up onto Dzoni, but didn't manage to find it. And that means that Hex Mambo don't have a whole lot to worry about over here. And they're just going to walk their way into this T2. They don't have minions for quite some time, Blur. So it's going to be a lot of staring at each other. And Yodie Gang are going to have to contemplate how much they're willing to give up here. Because if Hex Mambo go for this Phoenix, that might be the only place you can stake your claim if you're the Yodie Gang. PrettyPriMe is going to drop the ult, hit 3 actually, and put some decent damage down. And once again, the Yodie Gang seem like they want to chase down. But once again, Dzoni is just making it impossible for them.
Unfortunate. I say it hit 3, but Julio just stood there and took the damage like they did last game. Not concerned. Sun Tzu answers back effectively into Dzoni. And now it's a 2v1 situation, but the rest of the team still sieging up this left-hand side. Dzoni might be in a little trouble, but a good stun keeps them away, and they will disengage from there. But I'm pretty sure if they really wanted, they could probably take this fight, because the rest of the team comes around the corner. But look at that, Sun Tzu just goes straight in on Dzoni, but the peel is there from Julio, and now they're getting turned and burned.
Rapio goes into the ult, home sweet home popped in. LaRevolution is going, and they want the fight!
They do want to fight, but PrettyPriMe is back. They'll look to try and fight it, but LaRevolution's health bar just cannot withstand this damage output. Every single time LaRevolution has gone in, they have inevitably fallen trying to set up a play that I'm not even sure if they got it off, the team could capitalize on. PrettyPriMe is level 16, and sure has a fair bit of pen online, but a lot of Vulcan's damage is constantly coming through from keeping people in Inferno Cannon, it feels like. And if the 1-3 combo doesn't do enough, You gotta realize that. And the team has to know that, surely.
BOBA is in front of the gates of the Hex Mambo base, looking for trouble. Won't find it, and that means that Hex Mambo will just very comfortably move their way over to this fire giant. Blur, I don't think anybody from Yodie Gang is going to be showing up to this one, and even if they did, I don't know if it would be a good idea for them to do so. Hex Mambo will land the FG, and Cozy is going in.
Cozy throws out the summon sticks, but in doing so, gets a little bit of damage from PrettyPriMe from max range ultimate. BOBA goes in with the ultimate. 2-man knockup. This is the best fight they've had so far. Julio, the target right now because of their low HP, will get taken down. That's a good shutdown, and it's one member gone. But BOBA sidestepping a little bit of damage, puts a TKO on Cozy and Spudio. But Johnny's here, and in this late game when everyone's abilities are down, Johnny could continue to run it through, but instead, Hex Mambo, again, this precision, cool, calm, collected. They're not going to brute force this. They got Fire Giant. Let's just use this Fire Giant for what its intended purpose is.
I do think you called it right, though, that seemed to be the best fight that Yodie Gang had. Cozy drops the summon sticks and perhaps a little bit far away from the rest of his team. I think that the help was a little bit further behind than he really expected. And they do lose Julio's FG, which is no small component to what Hex Mambo want to do around these objective sieges, and in particular when they try to go up around this Phoenix. But it does still mean that 4 people on the Hex Mambo with about a 7,000 gold lead get to march their way down to just about whatever they want. And Blur, usually around this stage of the game, I'm talking, what are you giving up if you're Yodie Gang, and what do you need to defend? I think that you can realistically choose either decision to stake your claim on one of these Phoenixes or try to give one up and then try to defend the rest of the base. But you need your mid laner, and he is dead.
No. Seagyll just turned around, and this is the thing, like, it was just one instance of PrettyPriMe throws the 1 and 3. Johnny waits that out perfectly, says, I don't need to wait. I can wait. Once the peel's gone, I go in. That was a basic attack, a dart, and the Acorn Blast. That was it. And like you said, they need their mid laner here to try and deal with this. But Yodie Gang, you ask what can they give up like for this. I'm asking, what do they have that they could even think about giving up?
They're going to need some tributes or something. Like maybe present a gift to the Hex Mambo and hope they back away. Because otherwise, they're going to be taking everything by force. And they're going to start this right Phoenix here, Blur. No minion wave in mid means that Middlebird less likely to go down right here. Everybody respawning as well from Yodie Gang, and they're right back into the gauntlet, man. I mean, say what you will about the way this game is played out. The Yodie Gang are not deterred whatsoever and seem to be willing to fight at the drop of a hat. They're going to need to put those talents to good use here as everybody grouped up from Hex Mambo. This could be the most critical fight of the game right here.
This could be the make or break. Clutch or kick moment here for Yodie Gang. If this fight goes poorly, Hex Mambo walk in and take the Titan. So everyone falling back, hiding around that Phoenix, using that for a little bit of extra cover. Wave clear-wise, it doesn't seem too bad.
Here we
but
go.
Not if Hex Mambo just go over the top. Spudio's pulled in, though, and that's huge for them. Spudio's the first to fall. BOBA ends up falling to Rapio in the backline. Health bars get low on both sides. The Phoenix, and that's what's important.
And Cozy's tanking it up. Johnny's in no man's land contending with Seagyll, and they're going to walk back in here. Hex Mambo, no damage on the bird, though, because Spudio's dead. Yodie Gang seem to have held the base, and really it seems more often than me, Blur, like, that's got to be exclusively on Spudio. You know, SMITE is very much a team game, but you're right. He still has beads available, and he got pulled in by BOBA, and that was really the only reason they lost that fight. Otherwise, probably could have gone pretty well for them. Yodie Gang know this Oni's going on. They're once again trying to fight over it.
And it's just to try and run out the clock at this point. But look who's going in aggressively. This Baba Yaga's damage is not to be deterred at this point. And Johnny's got the ult again. They'll chase down any stragglers they can find. Jump on in, but don't find a home. Stealing with 3v1. Usually that's the front line's job, but they just don't care. It's Cozy. Finds Seagyll from the back with the ultimate. And Yodie Gang are forced to retreat here. Out comes, you know, from PrettyPriMe to try and deter anything more. But Rapio, yeah, Rapio's going in aggressively, but BOBA's able to answer them back. And now Cozy's in trouble. hosted by their own petard. Hex Mambo have got themselves in a bit of a trouble here, but Dzoni can just answer back perfectly. And now with Spudio here, they've still got Julio to frontline this. They could look for this mid-Phoenix.
Julio is quite low, however, and they do have a wave coming, so they'll back up and play it a little bit slower. Julio actually gets pulled in here. LaRevolution gets one, but immediately dies in return. And that's going to be a deicide blur. It does not look good for the Yodie Gang's chances.
Not all trades are created equally. You can say that in chess, and you can say that in Smite. Trading out the support for the solo lane, get a kill on the support. That's great. But look at what you gave up. You gave up the mid-Phoenix directly after, and now Yodie Gang find themselves with their backs to the wall. It's still that 10k gold lead. They've managed to sort of halt it there, but that's not saying much because it's still very much relevant, and with 2 Phoenixes down, looking at this, we've seen decent enough holds from Yodie Gang right now, but do they have enough time to get online fully here? I mean, Sun Tzu's almost full build, and if we could take a quick peek at perhaps player damage, I have a feeling that they are pumping out most of it on the team.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right about that. And Yodie Gang, actually, they are 100% committing this Fire Giant here, Blur.
Okay, let's have a peek and see how it goes. LaRevolution still waiting on it. There's some big ultimates that come out from Hex Mambo to start the fight, but Yodie Gang do get themselves the Fire Giant. It is secured, and now they're going to find themselves Cozy because Cozy's left alone. Every member from Hex Mambo just meandered their way over here. Didn't think there was too much of a threat. But look at this Yodie Gang. For the first time ever, I get to say they do not start or take a fight.
Yodie Gang are possibly the coolest team I've had the pleasure to watch in a long time, Blur. Because they've been behind literally this entire game, and they've played more aggressively than Hex Mambo have the entire game. I mean, that's the second Fire Giant that they've gotten, despite the fact that if we pull up the graphs, I don't think that it even tips into their territory a single time this game. They are 11,000 gold down, calling the shots around these Fire Giants, getting a 1-for-0 and FG on 5 members. And I was going to say right before that happened that if this game continues the way that it's going, and the Hex Mambo don't find a clean team fight, mathematically speaking, Yodie Gang likely win this game. And that might sound bizarre to say, but they're throwing so much against the wall to see what sticks that eventually something's going to. If you keep knocking on the front door of Hex Mambo every team fight and say, we're going to fight you from minute 1 to minute 60 in this game, sometimes you make a mistake. Eventually, somebody from Hex Mambo is going to, for example, not beads a gravity surge on a critical Phoenix siege, or not be available when Yodie Gang walks up to the Fire Giant pit. Hex Mambo are forced to continue to play surprisingly defensively, despite the fact that they are this far ahead, and it's so impressive from Yodie Gang.
Oh, this could be a huge problem here. BOBA dashed in away. They found Dzoni in a 2v1, and Dzoni will answer that one quite happily. And that's a big fight to start things off. Now Julio turning back in Sun Tzu here.
That's big.
It is pretty big, but the fight seems to fizzle for a little bit until Seagyll starts trying to frontline, and they just can't do it. Rapio picks up one into the backline. Goes Julio to distract the damage from PrettyPriMe, and Rapio gets himself a double, make it a triple kill now. And LaRevolution will be the last to fall, but they will end up falling here. With mid-Phoenix still down, could Hex Mambo even go for an end here? Look at the calls, look at the pings.
This is a bizarre situation where the Titan is on holiday and will not be available in the fountain room once they get there. They do look like they sent Dzoni and Julio to go deal with that. So they do eventually banish it back to the Shadow Realm and will be able to at least contend with it.
And look at the damage output. BOBA's the only one up, but they're just going to be here to be able to start writing the obituary for the Titan. Scratch that, though. Spudio says, yeah, we're just going to put you down. No ifs, ands, or buts. Hex Mambo take the set in 2.
Hex Mambo take it in 2, but Yodie Gang put up the best fight I have literally ever seen in my entire time casting Smite from behind. It is very infrequently that you will find a team that is so willing to fight and makes most of the fights actually look pretty close. I mean, you consider the fact that they're 7, 8, 9, 10,000 gold down, still making these 1-for-2s and 1-for-0s in their favor, getting the only 2 Fire Giants of the game for themselves as the losing team. It's pretty impressive what Yodie Gang were managing to do, even though Hex Mambo come away with it.
It is, and Hex Mambo, this second phase, they've had a couple of little issues where they've been a little bit sloppy. They've lost a couple of games. I believe they lost a set to one of the other teams, and this has been the team that has been touted since its inception as the team in EU. Dzoni has been, whatever team Dzoni is on, this is the team you look at. But that game, it wasn't just Dzoni running the show. Sure, the first couple of kills go their way, but that was the spark. The rest of the team was a powder keg, and it just blew up in Yodie Gang's face, it seems.
Yeah, Rapio looked incredibly good in the mid lane as well. I think that that's one that we definitely need to point out, because don't forget, Rapio not traditionally a mid lane player, coming out of the jungle and swapping into the mid lane role, looked pretty at home a lot of the time, played reasonably aggressive, as you could probably expect from a jungler transitioning into the mid role. But you're totally right, Blair. It was definitely a unified effort from everybody on Hex Mambo. Dzoni, definitely the driving force, perhaps the engine of their composition, but certainly a unified offensive from the Hex Mambo.
It was. So commiserations to the Yodie Gang for that. But congratulations to Hex Mambo. They will be going ahead and moving on from that. But that is it from us. We're going to go ahead and throw it back for the rest of this set.
That's right, a 2-0 cements a pretty convincing victory, I think I would say, for Hex Mambo here. Chelly, you could probably go a little further into detail, but one of the teams had 38 kills. The other team had 11.
Yep.
And when they skew that far apart, normally kills don't tell the whole story, but when they skew that far apart, usually it starts to be an indication of something.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of bloodshed this game. I believe like 14 kills for Dzoni, like 10 at the end there after the quadra kill for Rapio. But with that said, I do think that Yodie Gang found some opportunities to fight back. They were on the defensive. They were able to sneak away, or not sneak away, it was more so win a fight and, you know, just try and burn down a Fire Giant before Hex Mambo was able to respond to it. But even against all that adversity, it was pretty easy for Hex Mambo to find the fight at the end there that ended up catching out BOBA, and then once you lose your jungler, it just got a little bit worse, right? The 4v5 is never going to be good. I'm surprised that this many kills happened in a 28-minute game, though. That's the big difference for me, is when you see a 38 kills total for a team, you're looking at 40+ minutes, and no, this was relatively quick for that much bloodshed. Essentially an arena game is what I saw.
And it's the amount of control, man. I mean, they had mentioned it just on the cast, and you had mentioned it, but 14 kills for Dzoni. Almost a penta, but not, so it doesn't count.
That's true. It doesn't count.
But still, able to pick up a whole ton. Like you had mentioned, Rapio does a whole ton towards the end. The damage numbers that these guys are putting out is just, it felt too difficult to try and handle. And there's that quadra kill as well there for Rapio. So a lot of, again, a lot of capabilities coming out. 10, 3, and 11, 14, 1, and 18. You can definitely tell who was getting the last hits. And then you can look down and see that the damage numbers match up. And you had highlighted it, right? Like Baba Yaga, the later the game goes, the better it's going to be. Or if you can just hit that late game state quickly, which is what Dzoni allowed, right? He said, okay, yeah, I'll carry you through the first few levels, and then we'll get there. And that's what that 14-1 has done for the rest of the team. They all show up, and they all win this one. So an important note, Trelly, is that Hex Mambo is now one step closer to getting to Group C, which is, again, that group that has the two teams that qualify expected for the #1 seed. But the road isn't quite over for them just yet. And the same thing can be said for Yodie Gang, right? This is an unfortunate loss, but you were going up against the #1 seed in Europe, and it showed that they have a reason to be the #1 seed. Yep. So Yodie Gang's not knocked out yet, and Hex Mambo still a little bit to go. So we're going to see both of those teams a little bit later in the week. But a lot of what we're looking at, I think, for, well, not just today. Today is a bunch of first-rounders. But also for this weekend is going to see how exactly they can shake out. So Yodie Gang are going to be into a spot where this next match for them is do or die. As the winner of Hex Mambo will just go to Group C, and then the winner of that match 5 where Yodie Gang is hanging out will go to 9, and then the winner of that one will go to Group C and have their opportunity. So they are now in do or die territory for a double elimination group. And later today, we'll be taking a look at the Tanuki and the Bolts. Figure out who's going to be joining Hex Mambo, who's going to be joining Yodie Gang. And then later on this week, we'll figure out the rest of that group. We'll be moving over towards Group B, though. That's a good look at Group A. Group B, in just a little bit. It really is showcasing, A, how tough some of these opponents are going to be, and B, how much Smite they got to play to get there.
And I'd be looking at this matchup if I'm in Group B, looking at Hex Mambo, how they're performing so far. Like, you know, maybe they'll be a little bit shaky, maybe they'll be off their game. Not a great sign to see them this dominant, but even also watching Yodie Gang and be like, okay, I saw some shimmers of greatness there. Even when down, you can't count them out. They have good decision making. They were able to try and climb back into the game, you know, go for those sneaky fire giant calls, go for those burst mages, which are very prevalent in the meta at the moment. So I think if this is the bar that the rest of this week has set, should be some sparks flying for sure.
Well, I'm excited to see how the rest of this weekend's going to shake out. That's, like you said, only the first set of many. And so, without further ado, we're going to kick it to a quick break, and then when we get back, we've got the Scarabs taking on the Penguins.